So picture this. It's 1950, and a top-secret report lands on President Truman's desk. This thing was so explosive, so radical, that it stayed locked away from the public for 25 years. This document, known as NSC-68, would literally become the secret blueprint for how America decided to fight the Cold War. Okay, let's get into it.
I mean, that's the real question, right? How did the United States go from wanting peace after World War II to jumping headfirst into a global struggle that would define the rest of the century? Well, the answer, believe it or not, is pretty much laid out in the pages of this one document. It gave them the reason, the strategy, and the justification for the entire Cold War.
To really get NSC-68, you have to feel the absolute panic that was gripping Washington in 1949. You know, the victory in World War II was supposed to make everyone feel safe, but instead it felt like the world was just spinning completely out of control.
And things went bad fast. I mean, look at this timeline. First, in August, the Soviets get the bomb years, and I mean years, before anyone thought they would. Suddenly, America's ultimate trump card, gone. Then, just 2 months later, China, the most populous country on Earth, falls to communism. All of a sudden, the U.S. looked incredibly vulnerable. So what does Truman do? He orders a total, top-to-bottom review of American security policy, and the result of that review was NSC-68.
Now, the people who wrote this report, led by a guy named Paul Nitze, didn't see the Soviet Union as just another rival. No, they saw it as a nation with a hostile design, a fundamental, unwavering plan to take over the entire globe. And this, right here, is the absolute core of their argument. The report painted the world in black and white. There was no gray area, no middle ground. You had the United States and the free world on one side, and on the other, the Soviet Union, which the report flat out called a slave state run by the grim oligarchy of the Kremlin.
It was presented as this epic clash of two totally incompatible worlds. On one side, you have America, whose whole purpose is based on individual liberty and making a world where freedom can thrive. And on the other, you've got the Kremlin, whose design is all about absolute power, destroying all opposition, and driven by what the report calls a fanatic faith. The main takeaway here is that they saw this as a fight for survival, not just a political disagreement.
And this quote is really the terrifying conclusion of that worldview. If the fight is global and absolute, then any loss for freedom, no matter how tiny or how far away, becomes a direct threat to the United States itself. A communist victory in some small country in Asia was now seen as a defeat for America right in its own backyard. This idea, well, it was going to have some massive consequences. So, after painting this incredibly grim picture of the Soviet threat, the report essentially walks up to President Truman and lays out 4 possible paths forward. This wasn't just some memo with suggestions. It was basically demanding a decision. And they just methodically tore apart the first 3 options. Option 1, just keep doing what we're doing. Nope, they said that was a recipe for a slow, guaranteed defeat. Option 2, isolationism, just pull back. They saw that as basically handing the rest of the world over to the Soviets. And option 3, a preventive war. Well, they rejected that as being immoral, un-American, and way too risky. So, in their minds, that left only one possible path. A rapid, massive, and total buildup of power across the entire free world. This was it. This was the dramatic, world-changing heart of NSC-68's recommendation.
And listen, this wasn't just about getting more bombs and soldiers. The strategy was huge. It called for military strength to be a shield, yeah, but also for a booming global economy to prove that capitalism was better. It called for psychological warfare, propaganda, covert ops, the whole shebang. And maybe most importantly, it argued that when your very survival is on the line, you don't worry about the budget. Money should be no object.
But here's the catch. This was all just a secret memo. Its ideas were radical and unbelievably expensive. At first, a lot of people, even in Truman's own government, were against it. So how did this thing actually become the official policy of the United States?
Well, a real-world crisis gave it the push it needed. Just 2 months after this report was written, North Korea, backed by the Soviets and Chinese, invaded South Korea. For Washington, this was it. This was the Kremlin's hostile design in action. The threat wasn't theoretical anymore, it was terrifyingly real. And just like that, all the political opposition to NSC-68's expensive plan, it just vanished.
And the impact on the checkbook was immediate and, frankly, staggering. Look at this. In just 3 years, defense spending as a chunk of the entire U.S. economy almost tripled. NSC-68 wasn't just a policy paper anymore, it was a blank check for a whole new way of engaging with the world. So, what NSC 68 really did was establish 4 new pillars for American foreign policy, and these pillars would hold for the next 40 years. First, America's interests are now global. Second, a loss anywhere is a loss everywhere. Third, and this is a big one, all communism is a single, monolithic movement controlled by Moscow, an idea that would have devastating consequences later on. And finally, the world is split in two. It's us versus them. There's no room to be neutral.
So, from a secret memo born out of fear, NSC 68 created a brand new vision for America's place in the world. It defined the enemy, it justified the enormous cost, and it set the stage for a conflict whose core beliefs, like that idea of a single communist threat, would drag the U.S. everywhere from the Berlin Wall to the jungles of Vietnam. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. How would this stark, simple vision of freedom versus slavery shape and guide American power for the next 4 decades?